Hello, and welcome to our podcast, 1 Timothy, Verse by Verse, brought to you by Telios. This captivating podcast will detail each verse of 1 Timothy, providing guidance on church leadership, sound doctrine, and godly living. It lays a foundation for ordaining elders and provides practical advice for church governance. Thanks for joining us on this exciting biblical journey.
Hi, I'm William Stewart, co-founder of Telios. This is the verse-by-verse study on the book of 1 Timothy. I'm glad you're here today. We're in chapter 5, a very interesting chapter talking about the social problems of the Ephesians that were probably very similar across the Roman Empire. And Paul is taking a good bit of time to deal with these social issues. Again, it's important because the church represented a institution within the Roman Empire where people could go and potentially receive help. There was very little help from the Roman government in the Roman Empire itself. So there were some food benefits around Rome. Occasionally there was free handouts of land, especially to the soldiers who had served a particular general. But there was not a social benefit program as we see in so many countries today. Therefore, a person could come to a church, perhaps even act normally, fit in socially, say the right things, act a certain way, similar to other people in the church, and they would be accepted, and then people might help them, or the church might help them. So Paul, I think, is then forced to deal with particularly widows who lost their husbands through illness or perhaps through fighting in war that came to the church looking for benefit and setting some rules. I think this is still an issue today as people have lived longer and we have to care for our older parents and people in a very tender and loving way. So we're going to deal with verses 3 to 10 today. And I'm not going to read all of this, but I think the issues really fall out into two areas which Paul is addressing. One is the children. He's saying that the children need to repay their parents and take care of them, and as they were taking care of themselves. And if they don't do this, that they really are acting, and this is verse 8, worse than an infidel, because even infidels will take care of their parents. So I don't think salvation's in view here. As I also checked the commentators, they seem to agree as well. It's a behavior thing in society that they're acting worse than an infidel. So they aren't basically denying the love that God tells them to have. The word here in the original Greek, deny, or neomai, most generally refers to salvation, but not always. So I think there's flexibility there. So the first point Paul is making, if a widow then needs help, it should first fall to the family to help them and not the church. Now, the second point then comes, who indeed are the widows? How do we define these? And I think there are two broad rules here. One is age. She needs to be 60 or above. Otherwise, and we'll talk about the younger widows next time, but at this age, probably they can't go out and get remarried, have children, start a family. If they've lost their husband in Roman society, they really had no choice. Like we talked about last week, women were really relegated to the household. They didn't have outside jobs. They just weren't available. Women were to keep the home and raise the kids. Now, they may have basically ruled the home while the husband was out working and had power and authority in that regard, but they were then left, in a sense, desolate if they lost their husband in most cases. So they should be older, and also they should have been faithful. And it specifies this, that they had brought up children, they had watched strangers, they had helped the saints, helped the poor, and been diligent in every good work and not live sort of a wanton lifestyle. Otherwise, if they were in the church and behaved in a positive way before society and was helpful, then, and they were above 60, they could be eligible for help from the church if their families couldn't help them. Now you notice spiritual attributes are not mentioned in this passage for these widows. And I think the reason is because probably a lot of them just didn't have it, yet they were still in the church and may have served faithfully in the church in some manner. And maybe they were even tares, not really even true believers, but have fit in to society. So he gives a social acceptability and not necessarily a spiritual acceptability to keep them on the widow list. Otherwise, if a widow had been in the church for years, even if she hadn't taught or led other people to Christ or had a lot of spiritual fruit, to deny her at that point also wouldn't have looked good before society. So again, the church is having to present itself in an acceptable way before society and to be fair to people, much like it has to do today. Okay, so let's review. We've talked about between verses 3 and 10 that for widows, they should have been to be on the widow's list, to be helped by the church. They should be older and should have lived a societally acceptable and a positive life. They should only be on this list if their kids will not have helped them or they didn't have children to help them. But if the children are there, they're in the church, they should help them first. Okay, good practical rules for then and for now. Thank you for joining me today. We'll talk about the younger widows next time and move on through different social aspects and issues that Paul's addressing for the Ephesian church and, of course, for us as well. I'll look forward to seeing you next time.
Thanks for listening to this episode of our podcast, 1 Timothy, Verse by Verse. We hope you found the teachings both interesting and informative. Join us next week for another exciting episode. To listen to all episodes, please visit our website at teliosresearch.com.